What if I told you that Facebook has invested billions of dollars into developing a headset that will allow the user to type 100 words per minute with just their thoughts?
That doesn't make sense.
Seriously, here, let me show you.
And you're also going to hear from Regina Dugan about some of the work that we're doing in Building 8, even further out beyond augmented reality. And that includes work around direct brain interfaces that are going to eventually one day let you communicate using only your mind.
Your brain has 86 billion neurons that fire 1,000 times per second. Now, they don't all fire at the same time, so let's decrease that by a factor of 100. That would mean your brain is capable of producing about 1 terabit per second. About 40 HD movies are streaming in your brain every second. And herein lies the problem. How do I get all of that information out of my brain and into the world? What are my choices? What if you could type directly from your brain? It sounds impossible, but it's closer than you may realize. And it's just the kind of fluid human-computer interface needed for AR. Today, we've assembled a team of more than 60 scientists, engineers, and system integrators. They specialize in machine learning methods for decoding speech and language, in optical neuroimaging systems that push the limits of spatial resolution, in the most advanced neural prosthetics in the world. And we're just getting started. Together, we have a goal of creating a system capable of typing 100 words per minute, 5 times faster than you can type on your smartphone, straight from your brain. Over the past 3 decades, work in artificial speech recognition has produced powerful tools to decode text from brain activity while people are speaking. This is real data showing the remarkable result of mapping brain signals to text directly.
Who is that woman? I know her from somewhere. Great question, Jimmy. That's Regina Dugan. She's worked with the US Army, Navy, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Clinton Global Initiative, Google, and she's a former director of DARPA. DARPA is one of the most sophisticated military weapons development agencies in the entire world. Why would Facebook hire her to lead this project? Don't worry about that, Jimmy. Let's move on. The fields of neuroscience and neurotechnology are constantly evolving at a remarkable pace, and we are witnessing unprecedented possibilities for accessing, collecting, sharing, and manipulating information from the human brain. Neurodevices tailored towards the general public are becoming increasingly more prevalent. Most neurodevices function as a wearable headset and analyze the EEG patterns from the consumer's brain. These devices allow users to operate a vast array of different toys, video games, and computer applications with just their thoughts. Prosthetic limbs can now be wired directly into the brain and operate as if they were never lost. People can regain the use of arms, legs, hands, feet, fingers, and toes, all with normal, intuitive thought processes. These limbs can also restore the sense of touch via sensory networks connected into the nervous system. In 2016, researchers were able to fix paralysis in a primate with 2 invasive brain-computer interfaces. One was implanted into the primate's brain, and the other was inserted into the spinal cord below the injury. They established a wireless connection between the 2 BCIs, allowing the brain signals to bypass the spinal injury, and the primate regained the ability to walk again. In 2017, Steve Hoffman gave a TED Talk regarding the future of brain-computer interfaces. He made the prediction that the current ability that we now have to transfer consciousness and memory in animals will eventually evolve to humans.
Scientists have done experiments with rats, and they have chips in the rat's brain. And what they did was they taught a rat how to do certain things. And when the rat did all these complex things, it could get food. Now, it took the rat weeks to learn that. Weeks. But then they hooked the rat's brain chip to the internet. And they had another rat in another city. And instantly they connected those 2 rats' brains. And do you know what happened? The other rat knew how to get the food right away. It didn't have to learn anything. The knowledge was transferred from one brain of a living animal to another brain. That is amazing. That opens up a world of possibilities, because if they can do that in rats today, Imagine 10 years from now what they can do in humans. And we will go there. We will not only be able to transfer knowledge, but we will be able to transfer memories. Now, so you could have an experience like skydiving, and all of a sudden you could transfer that experience to a friend, and all of a sudden they have experienced what you have experienced. It gets even weirder. We won't know the difference between our own memory and a memory we acquired from someone else. Think about that. It will radically change how we perceive existence. So if you start to go down this path, you see we won't even be, our life today will be totally alien to us. We will be living in a whole nother reality that is blending information, sensory information, data information, memories, all of this from all around the world in this vast internet. And that will and can happen.
In 2021, a Stanford-led team of scientists conducted a study that focused on helping paralyzed people text, email, bank, and shop online. They implanted electrodes on the surface of a 65-year-old quadriplegic man's brain, attempting to increase brain-to-text capability with BCIs. The man was able to compose sentences on a computer at 90 characters per minute with 94% raw accuracy and over 99% accuracy with autocorrect enabled. That's how fast a person of similar age can type on a smartphone. In July of 2021, two goats of investigative journalism, James Corbett and Whitney Webb, discussed some enormous concerns regarding the goals of the recently formed organization Welcome Leap.
So Welcome Leap is basically a global research agency focusing on bioengineering and transhumanist tech that is also being modeled by national governments. So this isn't necessarily exclusive in that sense, but it's definitely something to look at. And as we can get into in a moment, their projects are really astounding in what they claim to achieve within a 5 to 10 year period, which is quite small. But with the influence and the funding of the Wellcome Trust, and of course the U.S. military and Silicon Valley connections here definitely make this a formidable force. But of course, it's only really been set up and is just beginning, and their agenda can be stopped if we make it so. The second program they announced, I would argue, is, at least to me anyway, was the most disturbing. It's called The First 1,000 Days, Promoting Healthy Brain Networks. It's specifically targeted at children from 3 months of age, literal babies, to 3-year-old toddlers who it seeks to have as its test subjects, essentially. And so this one really has 3 different components, and is frankly just mind-boggling. So I would honestly, if this sounds unbelievable to you, I would encourage you to go to either Welcome Leap's website or my article and read the official document describing what this program is, which they abbreviate as 1KD, a much shorter version. Basically, what they want to do initially is surveil through various means, including wearables, eye tracking technology, 24/7 surveillance of the youngest children in order to risk stratify them, predict their responses to interventions in their developing brains, for various reasons. But the first goal is to basically use this access to children's brains to map them on a massive scale, as many kids as possible, in order to develop what they call, the second goal, an in silico model of a human developing brain. By mapping and surveilling really the brains of babies and toddlers in order to presumably from there have something that develops a brain, artificial brain model that develops from there like a normal human would over time. But that's not where the program ends. Beyond that, what they want to do then is, once they have this model of the perfect, I guess you could say, developing brain, they want to then go to, within 10 years, 80% of children, and use that model to assess children's brains to see if they fit this model or not. And if they do not fit it, to intervene in their developing brains so they fit this AI model of the correct brain, which in the hands of these people is just totally nuts. And honestly, talking about this, even as I was writing it, it's really hard to find words to describe what this is, but really, if allowed to advance specifically to that third stage, could easily eliminate human creativity, the capacity for imagination at a critical time in a human being's development. And when we get to the last program, it becomes pretty clear that Welcome Leap has an agenda like that for adults as well. But the fact that they are targeting children specifically and plan to target them in a massive way within 10 years is just stunning. And I think shows that these people really think they cannot be stopped. And it's really, I would argue up to concerned parents and concerned citizens to protect the most vulnerable from this type of invasive technology. All very unclear, but one thing that points to sort of the eugenics issue once again in this is how they want to genetically engineer stuff also, not just to prevent disease, which is the most common justification they give, but also to enhance desired properties within organs and all of this stuff, inserting, human augmentation into this purported goal to eliminate disease and make the world a happier, better place. A lot of these advertising slogans of health utopia are quite common in Welcome Leap's documents.
Crazy stuff. You're absolutely right. Please do read it and comprehend what they are saying here. 80% of children they want to get in this net so that they can compare to their ideal brain model that they're going to construct. It's just absolute insanity. But at the very least, I want people to reflect on the fact that this is eugenics. There is no way around it. This is exactly eugenics. And of course, framed in the way that eugenicists would actually frame it. No, this isn't about eliminating people from the gene pool. It's about improving the gene pool and intervening to help develop and nurture the humans. Yes, that's why we want total surveillance of newborns. People 3 months old, we're going to get into them and non-invasively, surely, just map their neural networks and their brains and compare them to our models. It's absolute supervillain level insanity that you can barely believe they put it in black and white like this, but here it is. And who's going to read a boring report from some charitable foundation like this?
But one of the most interesting research areas I found that they're hoping to pursue are the development of wearables that they say will provide an easy way to quantify mood, your sleep, your emotional state, and also your effort levels, your motivation levels, and your energy levels, and your social interaction, and also ways within the brain to manipulate the axis between the adrenal glands, the pituitary glands, and the hypothalamus, just extreme manipulation over the human body. That particular axis, though, with the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands is significant as well, though, because that system not only manages stress reactions in the body, but also immunity and also fertility, which is, of course, significant in the theme of eugenics here. But is such a wearable far off? I don't really think so, because Amazon claims that their fitness wearable Halo can quantify your emotion already based on your voice and other things, and be like, gee, you sounded depressed from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. today. And of course, Amazon just bought this online pharmacy so they can send you antidepressants straight away just from listening to your voice. Among other things, that's sort of the future they're looking to build here. But of course, if this wearable does go to market and is going to keep you from monitor your motivation levels and the effort you're putting in, there's nothing to stop corporations like Amazon from using that on their workers, or not even, ones that jobs or not even companies that are as exploitative as Amazon, but maybe even office jobs or maybe even banking jobs or white collar jobs could see this implemented and like to make sure everyone is putting in the right amount of effort at work and all of this
right.
stuff. The wearable isn't the only thing they want to develop either. Another thing they have in here is what they call a single session neural monitoring device that can define a treatment predictive brain state. Basically, you're taken to a super machine that can interrogate your human brain state directly, it says, and predict how your brain will respond to various interventions or treatments that may, make you more motivated at work. As we mentioned earlier, a lot of these players have ties to the World Economic Forum, of course. I would argue, actually, probably the most important speech that I've seen at Davos recently in terms of what's coming took place in January 2020. It was Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari, a close friend of Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, whose work is heavily touted by Barack Obama and very much loved by the WEF crowd. He's given this fawning introduction. I believe her name is Orit Gadiesh, who basically runs Bain Capital right now. He's very much praised by the elite. And in this speech, he basically talks about how there's going to be an inevitable rise of what he calls digital dictatorships and data colonialism, and that this development throughout the world will become irreversible once the majority of the population starts wearing wearables that can interrogate their brain state and their thoughts and what they're thinking. And the example he gives is, okay, so you're in this society, this digital dictatorship, and the great leader, Big Brother, whatever, is giving a speech, and you can outwardly look happy and be clapping and just look just like you're supposed to look, but the wearable will know that you inside are angry and unhappy and have the wrong emotions and the wrong thoughts in relation to that speech. And these are his words. In the next morning, you'll be in the gulag as a result of that. And, the WEF elite, the Davos crowd are there clapping. He openly implores them at the end of that talk that the people in this room, the World Economic Forum members, take hold and develop this technology for their use. Otherwise, the rats might get a hold of it. Very jarring statement to make. I would encourage you to go and watch it.
Of all the different issues we face, 3 problems pose existential challenges to our species. These 3 existential challenges are nuclear war, ecological collapse, and technological disruption. We should focus on them. Now, nuclear war and ecological collapse are already familiar threats, so let me spend some time explaining the less familiar threat posed by technological disruption. In Davos, we hear so much about the enormous promises of technology, and these promises are certainly real, but technology might also disrupt human society and the very meaning of human life in numerous ways, ranging from the creation of a global useless class to the rise of data colonialism and of digital dictatorships. Biological knowledge multiplied by computing power, multiplied by data, equals the ability to hack humans. If you know enough biology and you have enough computing power and data, you can hack my body and my brain and my life, and you can understand me better than I understand myself. You can know my personality type, my political views, my sexual preferences, my mental weaknesses, my deepest fears and hopes. You know more about me than I know about myself. And you can do that not just to me, but to everyone. A system that understands us better than we understand ourselves can predict our feelings and decisions, can manipulate our feelings and decisions, and can ultimately make decisions for us. Now, in the past, many tyrants and governments wanted to do it, but nobody understood biology well enough. And nobody had enough computing power and data to hack millions of people. Neither the Gestapo nor the KGB could do it. But soon, at least some corporations and governments will be able to systematically hack all the people. We humans should get used to the idea that we are no longer mysterious souls. We are now hackable animals. That's what we are. The power to hack human beings can, of course, be used for good purposes, like providing much better healthcare. But if this power falls into the hands of a 21st century Stalin, the result will be the worst totalitarian regime in human history, and we already have a number of applicants for the job of 21st century Stalin. Just imagine North Korea in 20 years, when everybody has to wear a biometric bracelet which constantly monitors your blood pressure, your heart rate, your brain activity, 24 hours a day. You listen to a speech on the radio by the great leader, and they know what you actually feel. You can clap your hands and smile, but if you're angry, they know you'll be in the gulag tomorrow morning.
And as always, I think the very first ground level of this is awareness, true awareness of what is happening right now, because it is more important than ever that we understand and see through the propaganda on this, because it's going to be very effective propaganda for a lot of people. It's going to be covered in sunshine and rainbows and lollipops. They're going to eliminate cancer. They're going to wheel out the little 4-year-old girl who had this terrible 1 in a million birth defect, and we cured her with the gene therapy. Oh, look at this crippled person. Now he can type with his brain. They're going to wheel out all of this wonderful stuff that you can have if you just let us into your brain. And we have to see that for what it is, see through it, and not comply, not cooperate, not feed them our data.
In 2016, Elon Musk launched a corporation called Neuralink. Elon Musk is so cool. Remember when he smoked weed on Joe Rogan's podcast? I would say Elon is very unique. Neuralink's main objective is to expedite the advancement and development of their own brain-computer interface. Neuralink has recently conducted some very interesting animal trials. They implanted a Neuralink into the brain of a primate and then trained the primate to play the video game Pong with just its mind. Go Elon! He's probably trying to help paralyzed people improve their quality of life, right? That, and much more, Jimmy. Elon often states that one of their primary goals is not only to assist people with disabilities, but also to allow mankind to achieve a symbiosis with artificial intelligence. Excuse me? Well, Jimmy, Elon has spent years warning the public that artificial intelligence is humanity's greatest existential threat, heavily outweighing the threat of nuclear weapons. After realizing that he couldn't prevent the global advancements of AI, he decided to start Neuralink in an effort to one day merge humans with artificial intelligence. I don't know what you've been smoking, Shad, but there is no way Elon said any of that stuff. All right, Jimmy, just calm down and watch the clips.
I'm very close to the cutting edge in AI, and it scares the hell out of me. It's capable of vastly more than almost anyone knows, and the rate of improvement is exponential. Mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nukes. Far.
So I do want to emphasize that it's not going to be like suddenly Neuralink will have this incredible neural lace and start taking over people's brains. Okay. It will take a long time. And you'll see it coming. Yeah, this is going to sound pretty weird, but achieve a sort of symbiosis with artificial intelligence. So, but this is not a mandatory thing. This is a thing that you can choose to have if you want. And this is something I think that's going to be really important at a civilization level scale. So, and I've said a lot about AI over the years, but I think even in a benign AI scenario, we will be left behind. And so, and hopefully it is a benign scenario, but I think with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, I think we can actually go along for the ride. And we can effectively have the option of merging with AI. I think this is extremely important. The thing that will ultimately constrain our ability to be symbiotic with AI is bandwidth. So in the limit, after solving a bunch of brain-related diseases, there is the existential, it's mitigation of the existential threat of AI. Or, yeah, this is the point of it. So creating a well-aligned future, that's the idea. I feel like I'm in Transcendence. Actually, I was in Transcendence. This, I think, has a very good purpose, which is to cure important diseases, and ultimately to help secure humanity's future as a civilization relative to AI. The threads are very tiny, and there's a lot of them, and they're very carefully placed. And the operation on a per-chip basis, it involves just a 2 millimeter incision, which is dilated to 8 millimeters, and then the chip is placed through that, and then it goes back to being 2 millimeters, and you can basically glue it shut. You don't even need a stitch. So, and then the interface to the chip is wireless. So you have no wires poking out of your head. Very, very important. So it's basically Bluetooth to your phone. Because we'll have to watch the App Store updates for that one. Make sure we don't have a driver issue. Updating.
So the red things are electrodes firing, and then the green are the neuron bodies responding to the current from the electrode. So you can see them lighting up different brain regions. And then by carefully controlling the electric field, you can actually have one electrode influence possibly 1,000 or 10,000 neurons. So although you might only have 1,000 electrodes implanted, you could be influencing millions of neurons. And this is just a similar chart showing stimulation at different power levels. So, like I said, for the initial device, it's read-write in every channel with about 1,024 channels, all-day battery life, recharges overnight, has quite a long range. So you can have the range being to your phone, I should say. That's kind of an important thing. This would connect to your phone, and actually the application would be on your phone. And it will be communicating by essentially Bluetooth low energy to the device in your head. And we feel confident about getting the link procedure, the installation of a link, done in under an hour. So you can basically go in the morning and leave the hospital in the afternoon. And it can be done without general anesthesia. So in terms of getting a link, like I said, it's essentially you open a piece of skull. You remove about a coin-sized piece of skull, and then the robot inserts the electrodes. We'll talk more about that later. Then the device replaces the portion of skull that was removed, and we basically close that up with actually super glue, which is how a lot of wounds are closed, and then you can just walk around right afterwards. It's pretty cool. Yeah, in terms of upgrades, that's part of why I wanted to show the explanted pig, is to show that you can actually take the device out, and there's no observable behavior change. The pig is as happy as before and healthy, and I think this is going to be important for upgrades, because obviously if you get an early device, then by the time, let's say you get version 1, probably by the time we have version 3 or 4, you want to upgrade. You wouldn't want version 1 of a phone and 10 years later, everyone's got version 3 or 4. So it's going to be important to be able to remove the device and upgrade it over time. So over time, the Neuralink would do even more than it did before. with this implant, you can actually think, just by thinking, you can output words, and you can type, and you can control a computer, control a phone, and which is pretty wild. Yes, I think in the future you will be able to save and replay memories. I mean, this is obviously sounding increasingly like a Black Mirror episode, but well, I guess it's pretty good at predicting. But yeah, essentially, if you have a whole brain interface, everything that's encoded in memory, you could upload. You could basically store your memories as a backup and restore the memories. And ultimately, you could potentially download them into a new body or into a robot body. The future is going to be weird.
Whoa! Screw Elon Musk! This guy scares the fecal matter out of me. Elon is projecting that brain-computer interfaces will be just as common as cell phones within the next couple of decades. I don't give a rodent's rectum what he projects. I will never get a brain-computer interface. How many people in the 90s said that they would never get a cell phone, Jimmy? What happened there? That is totally different, Shad. I can't do anything without a cell phone now. I couldn't even get a job without one. I had to get a cell phone. Exactly my point, Jimmy. Neuralink is expecting to start human trials later this year. It is important to remember that although technological advancements can be largely beneficial, they can also be used to cause harm. Weaponized neurodevices continue to advance in unison with all other neurotechnology as time passes. Dr. James Giordano has delivered some very frightening, yet informative, presentations regarding militarized neuroweapons.
What we're here to talk about today is the fact that the brain is and will be the 21st century battlescape in many ways. End of story. We could stop it there and I could let you go back to your respective units and think about that for a while, but I'm here to tell you absolutely, as much as there's a big old Tyrolean nose on this face, that you will encounter some form of neurocognitive science that has been weaponized not only in your military career, but in your personal and professional lives. We can go further to implant certain brain-machine interfaces. These are many of the DARPA programs that you may hear of now. Probably the one that is most notorious, in a very good sense, is something called the N3 program, which is the non-invasive neurosurgical neuromodulation program being run by their program manager, Dr. Al Mundy. The idea here is to put minimal-sized electrodes in a network within a brain through only minimal intervention to be able to read and write into the brain function in real time, remotely. The United States is not alone in such efforts. We can also use a variety of computational brain-machine interfaces that are both closed and open loop, and these include things like transcranial magnetic and electrical stimulation, stimulating the vagus nerve transdermally, or if you wanted to get somewhat more invasive but certainly more specific, brain-machine interfaces by virtue of deep brain and superficial brain implants. And this is where we get into the idea of novel neuroweapons. Once again, this is not necessarily new, but the momentum of this dimension of the field has accelerated as a consequence of increased understanding of the brain and increased capability to develop tools and techniques to access and affect the brain. Is that increasingly what we find is that neuroscience and technology is relatively easy to obtain. Many of the things that I've just spoken to you about are viable and obtainable directly to the consumer or directly to the scientist. We also know that many of the products that are available direct to consumer can be easily modified to create things that have a much higher weaponization potential.
As many as 200 Americans are reporting possible symptoms of directed energy attacks on every continent except Antarctica. It's been called the Havana Syndrome for where it first started, because the mysterious neurological symptoms were first experienced by U.S. diplomats in Cuba. Roughly 24 possible cases have now been reported in Vienna by U.S. intelligence officers, as first reported by The New Yorker. Diplomats and other government officials have also been involved. Joining me now, NBC's Josh Lederman and Adam Enta, staff writer for The New Yorker.
The government still saying, Andrea, that they have no known source or culprit for this, although the leading theory still remains within the U.S. government. What came out of that National Academies of Science report, that pulsed microwave energy is the most likely thing to have affected these diplomats. The proliferation of these cases has really alarmed U.S. officials.
Dr. James Giordano, a senior fellow in biosecurity, technology, and ethics at the United States Naval War College, was brought in by the government to look over medical records of public servants in Havana.
Did something physical happen there? Yes. Does this suggest the possibility of some type of weaponizable device that can be used for individual and perhaps group and community disruption? Yes.
Nita Farahani, professor of law and philosophy at Duke University, speaks on the militarized use of neurotechnology, as well as some potential implications on the general public.
And so we'll talk about some of the ways in which we can go brain to something else right now, projecting your brain into the world without the limitations, and they are limitations, of your body serving as an intermediary in between. So the first thing I will say is some of you might be wondering, okay, is the military really interested in the brain? Like, are they really doing stuff with the brain? And the answer is yes, lots and lots of research experiments are done so. So here's just DARPA and the Brain Initiative. Okay, and if I click on this and just go to the Brain Initiative website, these are all of the, let's see if you can see it. Oh, you don't get to see it on your screen, just on my screen. Anyway, it's a long, long laundry list of different projects that the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency is funding. And if you know anything about DARPA, DARPA likes to fund cutting edge things. And of course, if they're funding them, it's because they have some military value or military purpose. A ton of the funding right now, simply in the regular budget, not even the black budget, is dedicated toward neuroscience. A lot more is happening without necessarily the transparency for all of us to see. Talk to a lot of neuroscience researchers and they will tell you that a great deal of their funding comes from DARPA. And that's because these things have extraordinary military potential. I'm not going to just talk about the military potential. I'm going to tell you some of the experiments in other contexts, because a lot of the experiments don't necessarily happen within the military or on military personnel. They happen in other contexts so that they have proof of concept of what the implications and applications could be in the military context. Brain training enables you to then reconsolidate memories. Every time you recall a memory, think about it as being like an open application on your computer. Okay, those things are in RAM, right, rather than stored in long-term memory. And while it's in RAM, it's far less stable, and it is far more pliable. You then save it onto your hard drive, which is the long-term storage. That process for memory of recall and storage again is called reconsolidation. And every time you remember something and then store it again, there's an opportunity to change and shape the memory. That change and shaping of the memory that occurs is something through neurofeedback that can in fact be incredibly effective. Recent research has shown in a pilot study with Vietnam War veterans with chronic treatment refractory PTSD who trained with the low-frequency neurofeedback protocol, there was a significant reduction in symptom severity after only 20 sessions of an hour each. Okay, 20 hours with significant untreatable PTSD now finally overcome. But of course, there are far more applications than just PTSD. The U.S. Army's Human Research and Engineering Directors, which has the mission of improving soldier-machine interaction in mission contexts, recently sponsored a major research study that looked into using this brainwave technology to monitor drowsiness of drivers and how it affects them by doing things like changing lanes. Now imagine all of the context in which if you could know that a soldier was drowsy while driving, have real-time feedback about that, and then be able to do something about that, how extraordinary that would be. Okay, there's a lot of different technology that car companies are starting to integrate into their cars to do this very thing. Like, for example, a Mercedes-Benz car has driver assist technology that looks to see whether or not a person is drowsy. That actually can also be incredibly useful in the military military context. So the Army Research Lab, for example, recently introduced the Human Variability Project, which is essentially, I kind of think of it as like the military version of Big Brother, the television show, except without all the drama of Big Brother. And what it essentially does is it takes a huge number of the biophysical signals in the body and turns it into machine-readable data by outfitting humans and their environment with lots of different sensors. Like, can we pick up everything that's happening in the human body? The Army isn't alone. The Air Force, Marine Corps, Navy, Special Ops Forces are also funding research to collect biophysical data from soldiers, sailors, Marines, and pilots. And the goal is to improve troop performance, right? The more we can understand the biophysical reactions of what's happening on the battlefield as what's happening during training, the better we are to be able to enhance and use that information to make modifications. I'll give you a different example. There's a company called MindRider. And what they want to do is they want to take these EEG devices and they want to put them into bike helmets for everybody bicycling. And they show on their little commercial for this a bunch of people in New York City all wearing the Mind Rider while they ride their bike, and they're able to see retrospectively, like, here's the area that I was the most stressed, here's the area that I'm most relaxed. But ideally, for Mind Rider, they would like this to be not just in bike helmets, but in far more kind of everyday usage. If we could figure out a way to integrate it with the Apple Watch or something like that, they would like that. And we'll talk about that for a moment, which is, can you take it from the brain and the head and move it down to the arm? And by doing so, they hope to take that information and be able to give real-time information and analytics about people's movements, people's feelings, people's expression and anxiety. And that information could be incredibly useful about whether or not a riot is about to happen, whether or not demonstrations are about to occur, and be able to use that kind of predictive information to be able to send and deter different response units. Okay, so I promised you we're going to look at the Apple Watch side of things, right? It turns out you don't just have to put this on people's heads. You can also put it on people's arms, because the brain is distributed in many ways throughout the entire body. Okay, the way it's distributed is your body sends and has nerve responses that go throughout every part of your body called motor neurons. Okay, these motor neurons communicate with every muscle fiber in your body, and we can pick up that information to detect a great deal of information about you as well. I went to a presentation recently by a neat company, a startup company out of New York called Control Labs. Okay? And Control Labs was demonstrating one of these little armbands. So what he demonstrated was one of these devices where it could pick up individual neurons firing to each of the different muscle fibers in the arm, which communicated with the hand, which meant when you type like this, it could pick up exactly the activity that was happening. And then he stopped moving his fingers and showed us typing by thinking about it with an armband on his iPhone. And then showed us moving a prosthetic arm by thinking about it with far greater precision and far less invasion than the current technologies, which embed electrodes into your brain or electrode arrays into your brain in order to enable people to operate a prosthetic device. A number of corporations have already started to use these devices in factory settings, on factory floors, to be able to monitor factory employees to see whether or not they are focused, paying attention, drowsy while engaged with heavy machinery. A number of insurance companies have started to look into the integration of these types of devices, this one and the head one, for truck drivers while driving, and for other people who operate significant equipment. Nissan just announced that they're planning on integrating an EEG headset to have something between self-driving vehicles and the ability to use humans, but more efficiently, being able to gauge their reaction times and use that faster reaction information as input into the car rather than being limited just by what your hands and what your output can do. This has extraordinary potential if we can actually bypass, in many ways, the limitations of the human body. The second major area I want to talk to you about is neuromodulation, right? It's one thing to pick up what's happening, it's another to improve it. Because we can improve output simply by bypassing some of the limitations of the human body, but we can also do things by improving what's happening in our brains itself. So this is the next big thing, okay, which is already being used. This is the Halo headset, which is used for transcranial direct current stimulation, okay? So let's forget drugs, let's just change your brain by zapping it, okay? But zapping it in some pretty precise ways. Transcranial electrical stimulation was one of the technologies that was touted by then Defense Secretary Ash Carter in July 2016 as part of his Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, or DIUX, initiative. Multiple SEAL units have already started actively testing this technology, and it is being used with a number of other special units within the military as well to see whether or not it can enhance and improve performance. The company that makes These brain-stimulating devices, this one in particular, because there are a number of them, is called Halo Neuroscience, as you heard. And they claim it's not cognitive enhancement, but neuropriming. Okay, that's the argument. What they're doing is enabling neuropriming. It was developed supposedly for elite athletes. The headset works by stimulating the brain to enter into a state of hyperelasticity, okay? Allowing users to learn better, learn more efficiently. In physical training, it's been proven useful to develop explosive power in athletes whose sports require vertical leaps or sudden starts. And improving by wearing these during training. For operators, the same system could improve shooting performance. Whatever you're training on, if it's movement-based, neuropriming is supposed to improve movement-based learning, movement-based speed, movement-based accuracy. And so for the incredibly hard training and sleep-deprived SEAL community, it's supposed to offer greater efficiency in training, perhaps allowing you to achieve far more in less time, or to train at the same level and get a boost in performance. But what duty do we owe to ensure that the types of questions that are being asked, the types of opportunities or the types of enhancements that are being offered are ones that can be entered into with true informed consent? And does informed consent really even mean the same thing in this context? I think there is an unfortunate history of subjects being forced or misled into participating in lots of different kinds of research experiments. We have no idea what the long-term implications of certain types of brain enhancements and alterations are. And we don't know what the implications of having real-time brain monitoring at all time mean with respect to privacy, mean with respect to revealing a tremendous amount of information about yourself that you might not otherwise reveal. And so we have to ask the questions about what are the implications of incorporating all this technology and ensure that we're comfortable about it at every step, not just because of the promise it offers, but in full understanding of some of the perils and some of the ethical quandaries that it raises as well.
Aaron and Melissa Dykes of TrueStream Media have long been considered the literal goats of investigative journalism. Here are some pertinent highlights of their work over the years.
For the first time, researchers at Cornell University have linked up the brains of multiple people using brain-to-brain interfaces so they can collaborate and work on specific problems. In the case of this study, the problem was to win at the game of Tetris. And so they linked up 3 people, and they're calling this system BrainNet. These researchers say we present BrainNet, which to our knowledge is the first multi-person, non-invasive, direct brain-to-brain interface for collaborative problem solving. The interface combines electroencephalography, that's EEG, to record brain signals and transcranial magnetic stimulation to deliver information non-invasively to the brain. Now that part they've been able to do for many years, but they're starting to really use it in a targeted way. They write the interface allows 3 human subjects to collaborate and solve a task using direct brain-to-brain communication. 2 of the 3 subjects are senders whose brain signals are decoded using real-time EEG data analysis. Now if you've seen the film The Minds of Men, that's one of the most important points that emerged out of the study of cybernetics and out of the study of the brain in the attempt to modify it. The ability to use real-time EEG data analysis to read the brain and to write the brain. These Cornell researchers conclude that their results raise the possibility of a future brain-to-brain interface that enables cooperative problem solving by humans using a social network of connected brains. That's the social network of the future.
DARPA is working on neural engineering system design. DARPA seeks proposal to design, build, demonstrate, and validate a neural interface platform capable of recording from more than 1 million neurons and stimulating more than 100,000 neurons in proposer-defined regions, so DARPA-defined regions of the human auditory, visual, and somatosensory cortex. The complete system must demonstrate high-precision detection, transduction, and encoding of neural activity. They want to stimulate and encode neural activity, and it actually says, if you go read the full text over here, they're talking about neural interface systems with simultaneous full duplex read and write interaction with at least 1,000 neurons in regions of the human sensory cortex. when they're working on neural interfaces to link people's brains to a computer, when they're working on pills that have antennas inside them that you swallow to send frequencies to your body. I mean, all this stuff that they're doing. But that's all because they want to help people, right, control bionic legs, microchip tattoos. I mean, because this is all going to be military, right? It's not ever going to be for the actual people. Well, here's one that is. And they openly say it, and the justification for it just made me laugh out loud. Check out what DARPA wants to do. This effort will develop a portable, inexpensive, and easy-to-use electroencephalography EEG device and corresponding mobile application app for use by non-traditional audiences. The product will provide real-time quantitative assessments of neural activity utilizing display and analyses platforms people already own. So that's your iPads and your iPhone. And then it goes on to talk about what an EEG does and how it records the brain's electrical activity. But it talks about how it's really great, but it's so expensive. So they've decided what we really need is an inexpensive, easy-to-use neural recording device. And the first reason they say we need it right here is that having EEGs in every classroom in America would engage students in science and technology in a way not previously possible in the field of neuroscience. Teachers could design lesson plans in the biology about the brain and sensory systems and use hands-on demonstrations to engage the students. Students could record their own brain activity and download the data to their iPads. Then it goes on to say you could include a portable EEG in a military first aid kit to help with traumatic brain injury diagnosis. Hello, okay? So, number one, DARPA's main concern is not the including of it as a military first aid device, which actually does make sense and is a way to justify such a thing. No, they want to have portable brain reading devices put into every classroom in America so that students can scan their brain activity and download it into their iPad. So this is called What If Your Brain Confesses?
And what the social effects might be as scientists begin to work more with lawyers using technologies like brain mapping, different ways of scanning the brain and incorporating those into trials, into the legal system, and having this influence basically how social justice is parceled out.
They're talking about the next generation of technology that's going to basically be used against the public. We're talking about some real Minority Report level Orwellian nightmare stuff here.
You know, the brain is a spatiotemporal device, right? It's a blob of meat that computes.
I think you guys need to hear this because this is the kind of stuff that they're talking about and the way they're talking about it.
There's a huge government program now to increase measurement technology for neuroscience. As it helps basic research and we can measure the brain better, that will have applications in brain decoding and interpretation of brain function that will be applicable to the law.
To figure out what you're thinking?
Anything that is in current conscious awareness can potentially be decoded.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of technologies.
What you're feeling, what you're seeing.
If you watch a movie, we can reconstruct the movie, right? Which is sort of a poor, dreamlike image of the movie. We can reconstruct the objects and actions in the movie just from your brain. We can reconstruct how you felt about the movie. Did it make you happy? Did it make you sad? Because valence information is available.
Reading your thoughts.
Thoughts and feelings that you may not be able to verbalize or you may not want to verbalize. And they may still leave a signature in your brain. And we might be able to decode that.
And doing it without your permission.
Those certain forms of mind reading, I think, for the most part today, requires the consent of an individual. But if we could get to the point where either you can have an unwilling suspect or an unwilling individual having their brain decoded in some sense, legal systems don't bake in any presumption that we can do that, and so there's no legal protections that could be afforded to you. And so if you look nationally, internationally, at whether or not there are any human rights, if there's any constitutional protections for something like freedom of thought or mental privacy or cognitive liberty, nothing like that exists yet.
Decoding your internal speech.
We can build models of various aspects of language, phonetics and syntax and semantics, and then once you have those models, you can actually decode language. Now, of course, the obvious application of that is decoding internal speech. And once you decode internal speech, then you essentially have, the sort of worst possible brain decoding device, or best possible, depending on your view. Certainly the most controversial brain decoding device.
Depends on your point of view.
And they're in there having a nice chat about it. Like, it's just going to be so great when we live in a world where this is the kind of technology they're using against people. And that the legal system has no protections for you.
We have the privilege against self-incrimination, but that's the spoken words that you speak against yourself. This isn't so far-fetched. There were a few cases that were highly publicized out of India where a different type of technology was used, where a person's brain essentially was queried, they remained silent, and the responses that their brain provided were used against them for the purposes of criminal conviction.
Which apparently they've already set the precedent for doing. And also they laugh it up about how basically the plebs are all such idiots that we can't wait to give up our privacy, like it doesn't exist, to wear thought-reading helmets.
And, personally, I think it's just a matter of time before there will be a portable brain decoding technology that decodes language as fast as you can type with your thumbs on your cell phone.
Wow.
And everyone will wear them because people have shown that they're quite willing to give up privacy for convenience. And then that, I think, brings up a lot of really interesting and scary ethical and privacy issues.
Good ones.
They always talk about the ethical implications of this kind of technology and how it raises all these questions. And then they just go ahead and do whatever it is anyway. For just a moment, take it in, okay? The NSA already spies on all of your communications now. What's going to happen when everyone's stumbling around like the residents of Bikini Bottom in the SpongeBob movie with the bucket helmets on, wearing these thought-decoding, mind-reading devices?
I think the technology already is there, not to steal the thoughts from a person's brain, but to enable us to start to decode information in the brain. And so I think we have to think about whether or not the brain is some special place of privacy. Is there some freedom of thought and not just freedom of speech that we need to be actively protecting?
Do we really need to think about that? Do we really need to think about if the brain is a special place of privacy or not? Is that really a question that we have to ask? And if that's not enough for you guys, if that doesn't do it for you, they've been doing research openly since the 70s, but of course during MK Ultra much earlier, on implanting false memories in people.
Elizabeth Loftus, who's done some really fascinating work looking at planting false memories, where she successfully in a number of her experiments has planted false memories, including people believing that they've been at Disney World with characters who are not Disney characters.
Many people believe that memory works like a recording device. You just record the information, then you call it up and play it back when you want to answer questions or identify images. But decades of work in psychology has shown that this just isn't true. Our memories are constructive. They're reconstructive. Memory works a little bit more like a Wikipedia page. You can go in there and change it, but so can other people.
Your memory is like Wikipedia. You can change it, and so can other people. What a comforting thought.
Not only can we put information in without blowing up your brain, we can put it in and then you can believe it so sincerely that the problem is you can testify to that effect. And now you're asked to testify as an eyewitness and you're so convicted about having seen that person commit the crime, even though that person's utterly innocent, that it becomes a planted memory. And so there's some really interesting research that we can plant false memories in the brain.
They just keep saying how interesting this is. I don't think interesting is the right word to describe it. Oh, then they do this thing where they ask the audience who they would trust with access to their thoughts, just to be cute. And look at the very first option.
Who would you trust with access to your thoughts and memories? And you can select from government, police, judges, your doctor, your employer, your spouse, or none of the above. Let's see what the Time poll showed about the sort of the general public's response on this first. If we can bring that up. No. Wow. Okay.
Which 3% of the audience was like, yes, I would love the government and police to have access to my thoughts?
One of the emerging areas that's really interesting in law neuroscience is pain detection. And once we understand the circuitries that cause pain, I guess the question is, could we then instill pain and use that in many coercive measures in the legal system as well? So.
Wow, that's amazing.
It just keeps getting more horrifying, you guys. And she said the word interesting again, like she has no other adjectives in her vocabulary to describe this. Get a thesaurus, lady, all right? To me, it is not interesting that law enforcement is considering using neuroscience to pinpoint areas in the brain, the pain centers, which of course is something they were studying under MKUltra all the way back in the 50s. To use that as a coercive measure to force people to have pain. What is this, scanners now? See, you could try to write a science fiction novel about this, but since it's all real, it wouldn't be science fiction.
And some of these cutting edge things sound incredibly like science fiction. It's like unlocking your brain to see the images in your brain or see the words in your brain.
Then at the end, they're like, what are your fears? Listen to this lady's fear of the future.
And so my fear is that we won't be able to keep up with the ways in which we can actually start to access the brain. And if we don't keep up, it will be in many senses too late. And I think freedom of thought is probably one of the most essential parts of diversity in society, divergent thinking, creativity, and progress. So that's my biggest fear.
Your thoughts will be criminalized. It says the idea of the human mind as the domain of absolute protection from external intrusion has persisted for centuries. Today, however, this presumption might no longer hold. Sophisticated neuroimaging machines and brain-to-computer interfaces that can detect the electrical activity of neurons enable us to decode and even alter the nervous system signals that accompany mental processes. This is Scientific American, by the way. This isn't some joke on CNN. And they're telling you right now they have technologies that can not only detect your neurons' electrical activity, they can decode that and alter those signals. They can screw with your brain. This is what they're saying. And they say that whereas these advances have a great potential for research and medicine, they pose a fundamental ethical, legal, and social challenge, determining whether or under what conditions it is legitimate to gain access to or interfere with another person's neural activity. That's the level we're at. And they go down to talk about the landmark case in 2008 in India where the woman was convicted for murder using an MRI, a functional MRI. They claimed she had experiential knowledge based on her brain activity. She didn't say anything, but based on the scan of her brain, they said she was guilty, and they put her in jail for life. And they're saying that commercial companies are marketing the use of functional MRIs and electroencephalography and EEG-based technology to ascertain truth or falsehood. And the military is testing monitoring techniques to use brain stimulation to increase a soldier's alertness or attention. But obviously, what they're not saying here is if they can use brain stimulation to do that, they can use it for other things too. And they're saying that brain reading technology is just another unavoidable trend, but given the sanctity of our mental privacy, we might not be so willing to accept this intrusion. Gee, you think? People could, in fact, look at this technology as something that requires the reconceptualization of basic human rights and the creation of neuro-specific rights. So that's where we're at. They're talking about this. And you'll recall that Bilderberg a couple years ago asked if privacy exists. They were talking about on all levels. I mean, the Air Force, I did a story about this a while back, is paying for studies where they use magnets and change people's belief in God. I mean, back during MKUltra, they kept all this stuff a secret. Today, they're just openly doing the Brain Initiative, which, just like MKUltra, features a lot of your favorites, such as the Rockefeller Foundation and DARPA. But today, when they talk about it, they openly say exactly what they're doing. They plan on trying to hack the soul. They put that on the cover of MIT magazines, hacking your soul. And they just openly say, we're going to go inside there and mess with your memories. And there are researchers coming out now talking about erasing bad memories. It's harmful manipulations of neuroactivity through the misuse of technology would pretty much sum up, in my opinion, everything that I know about MKUltra and what they were really trying to do there. So now they're just openly asking this question. And I guess George Orwell had it wrong, because in the smart Internet of Things grid future that they're building, you don't even apparently have a right to the few cubic centimeters inside your skull. We're supposed to have unalienable rights. I don't need a piece of paper with those rights written down on it. They're supposed to be unalienable, God-given. But once they put them down on the piece of paper, they sure do like to screw with them, don't they? We don't even have this. We don't even have cognitive liberty written down somewhere, because it was supposed to be a given. After all the things I've researched in the last 5 years, I can tell you that this is one of the biggest threats that we as individuals face. They're going to keep ratcheting up this technology, and if you think there isn't going to be backdoors built into that, the way there are backdoors built into every Windows operating system that's ever been created, well, I don't know what to tell you. People don't understand. This is coming. This is the biggest threat we face, and people don't get it. When I talk about it, people think I'm crazy. Well, that's what happens after you read the conference notes of these people who are working on this project for decades. And you look at the declassified documents and you spend hours of your life pulling books out of storage at libraries so you can read what these people were talking about back in 1942. And I'm just telling you, they've been planning this for a really long... This system that is coming, this beast system that is coming, this smart grid, smart derisive air quotes, grid Internet of Things system that just merges you with technology that's coming. There's a reason they're trying to dehumanize everybody to get you onto that. I mean, what's left? If they're going to start screwing with your neural activity without your conscious consent, what's left? This is the most depressing video I've ever recorded. And the thing is they never talk about the potential downsides, but lately I'm starting to actually see articles that do broach that subject. And it has to do not just with your privacy, but your actual autonomy. And experts are now starting to come out and say, hey, wait a minute, this actually isn't going to just look like the movie The Matrix. This might actually be a serious problem. It says right now these technologies could exacerbate social inequalities and offer corporations, hackers, governments, or anyone else new ways to exploit and manipulate people. Yeah, you got that right. When they're literally in your brain. Is the issue going to be privacy? Will these devices be able to read your thoughts as you walk around the same way cameras now capture your image? Well, we already know after having looked into this that the answer to that is yes. And they talk about autonomy. Will devices that read your thoughts and autofill what you want to do next make you feel like your free will has been hijacked? The ethical thinking has been insufficient. That statement is so underwhelming for the gravity of this particular situation. Science is advancing to the point where suddenly you can do things you never would have thought possible. That's a nice way of putting it. And they're coming up now, people at Davos, like I've mentioned this before in a prior video, they're coming out with phrases now where they're talking about cognitive liberty and the freedom of thought, because it's not automatically assumed just because you have a First Amendment right to free speech, or your Fourth Amendment or your Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself. Well, those are all things that have to do with what they claim is written words and spoken words, not your thoughts. So what these experts are coming out now saying is that legally there are no protections built in for the information in your brain. So if someone can access that remotely in your subconscious, thoughts you might not even know you're having, these are the kind of panel discussions people at Davos are having as to whether or not that information is sacred and private. And I feel like that should be a given, and yet they're now saying, no, clear distinction. We have to talk about whether or not we have a right to cognitive liberty. And that's not the conversation we should be having.
And again, they're trying to sell this to people. They're trying to make it as trendy as smartphones, which they got rapidly into everyone's hands voluntarily. Someday they may force people to take this, but right now it's still voluntary, and that's creepy enough.
Where they're saying, well, we're going to use these brain chips to fix all of these people who have all of these depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, personality disorders. There's a whole list in here, and they're saying we're going to fix those people with these brain chips. Everything right down to people who get hand cramps. We're going to fix them all with these brain chips, okay? And interestingly, the first time that this was done to someone just so happened to be on June 6th, 2006. It was the first time that they used implanted electrodes to remotely stimulate someone to not have depression feelings anymore. But as this article continues, there's an array of ethical questions. Does inserting a chip into someone's brain mediate their brain circuitry and change their identity? Might it eventually eventually lead to the ability to simply treat ourselves when feeling blue, a sort of high-tech take on Aldous Huxley's Soma? Could you use a DBS device to hack into someone's brain, or control them, or enhance them? Is it potentially dangerous in the wrong hands? But these are the kinds of questions they always toss out in these articles, so blithely like that, and then don't ever answer. Isn't that nice? And then they just go on to tell you how great it all is. Well, in this article, I will give credit where it's due. They actually did mention a few of the possible downsides here, because they found out that even the people they've been helping with these things who have Parkinson's and stuff like that, some of them completely flip out. Like this person, electrical stimulation of their brain resulted in him anxiously crouching in a corner, covering his face with his hands and speaking with a childish high-pitched voice, which when he snapped out of it later, he couldn't even remember doing, so he completely disassociated from himself. You have other people who had this for Parkinson's, and 20% of them said they feel like a machine. It also goes on to say that some of the side effects of this technology are word fluency and verbal memory decline, depression, increased suicidal tendencies, anxiety, and mania. So it can completely change people's personalities. They go on to say that it can make you a different person, and it can make all the people around you think you've changed.
People can hack your cell phone now. People can hack your computer, and it can be bad. They can steal your banking information, take all your money. They can steal your identity, but they can't really hurt you. In the future, though, if somebody hacks into your head because it's connected to the internet, they can steal you. They could actually steal you. They can implant memories in your head that you don't have. They could erase memories. They could control you in ways that you wouldn't even know you're being controlled. Is this scary? So I painted on the hand a heaven, but there is also a hell, right? This is heaven and hell. We are on the cusp of this technology that is so powerful and has the potential to so radically transform our lives and our existence, and we have to be very careful about how we do this. We don't want people controlling us. So think about this. Think very carefully. Everybody in this room are very smart people. You're all highly educated. We are going to be making these decisions that lay the groundwork for this technology in our lifetime. And those decisions will affect the rest of humanity more than any decisions we have made in the past.
In 2012, a study was done by the universities of Oxford, Berkeley, and Geneva, which utilized a neuro device to harvest information from its users. The researchers wanted to check if it was possible to steal critical data from the participants while they were using a non-invasive headset to play a video game. Shockingly, they were able to acquire the user's financial institution, ATM PIN number, birthday, and address with a significant accuracy of nearly 60%. That was done a decade ago? Holy smokes! Can you imagine what is possible now? I hope our government is keeping a close eye on all these corporations. I hate to say it, Jimmy, but our government has a documented history of being the villain in this area. Unfortunately, there has been a significant precedence of egregious acts committed by a vast array of governmental entities around the globe. Most notably were the MKUltra experiments that were conducted by the US and Canadian governments on their own unwitting civilians. This project was initially launched in 1953 by the CIA, and the main goal behind MKUltra was to attain 100% technological control over the human mind. In attempts of accomplishing that goal, tens of thousands of unconsenting victims had their brains experimented on. They were tortured, many were even killed. The majority of the victims were stuck in controlled environments, such as prisons and mental hospitals. On many occasions, when the victims spoke out about having their brains experimented on, they were labeled with psychological disorders, which were subsequently used to keep them detained longer. Many accomplishments occurred during this project by implanting electrodes to certain parts of the brain and stimulating them. These included the ability to shift a person's emotional state as well as the control of physical movement in animals. Project MKUltra was shut down in 1973 due to the Watergate scandal. CIA Director Richard Helms feared that the project would be exposed, so he ordered the complete destruction of all related evidence. Fortunately, a small cache of files survived, which was discovered in 1977 by a FOIA request from the Rockefeller Commission. This massive program operated secretly for 20 years, and its existence was almost erased without any public or congressional knowledge. These experiments were conducted entirely with government-approved tax dollars under the false justification of protecting national security. basically stating that if they could perfect the ability to control the human brain, then they could control any foreign enemy and eliminate any future conflict. To provide a bit of insight into just one of the 168 or so different sub-projects that MKUltra consisted of, let's take a look at Canada's most famous case, the Allen Memorial Institute, a psychiatric hospital at McGill University in Montreal. Led by Dr. Ewan Cameron, they created a method called, quote, psychic driving, end quote, where they used dangerously high-level electrical shocks to the patient's brain, inducing uncontrollable seizures multiple times a day, until the patient had literally no memory anymore. They couldn't remember their name, their family, they couldn't even walk or talk. This was referred to as, quote, wiping the slate clean, end quote. They then put the patient in a medically induced coma for months while constantly playing them tape-recorded messages trying to implant specific behavior. Hundreds of Canadians over the years, usually families of the victims, have sued the Canadian government. The government squashed most of these suits with large financial settlements while always attaching a non-disclosure agreement and stating that there was no wrongdoing.
That is the most heinous thing I've ever heard. How are they even able to do that?
Well, Jimmy, here in Canada, none of our human rights are absolute, meaning even the most fundamental rights and freedoms that are enshrined into our Constitution can be limited or suspended as long as an appropriate court approves of it.
So you're saying if a governmental entity acquired permission from a judge to experiment on my brain and torture me without my consent, they would be legally allowed to do so?
Yes, and it would be conducted with your own tax dollars.
How could a judge even attempt to justify such a thing?
That one's easy, Jimmy. They usually use very vague and ambiguous terms like stating that it's a matter of protecting national security.
My God, the documentation we have about MKUltra was just a sliver of the entire project. What about the other 99.9% of the evidence that they destroyed? What else were they doing? What kind of government wants to attain complete control of the human brain so bad that they were willing to experiment on, torture, and kill its own citizens? We need to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Whoa, hold on a minute, Jimmy. Just because the US and Canadian governments spent an unmeasurable amount of resources attempting to acquire technological control of the human brain by experimenting on torturing and killing their own civilians over a 20-year period while also trying to abolish any related evidence to avoid public or congressional knowledge, does not mean they would be interested in doing so again in the future. Your government loves you.
This isn't funny, Shad. We need to make sure these kinds of crimes against humanity cannot occur again.
Alright, I'll tell you what, Jimmy. I'll start a movement focused on enacting neuro-specific human rights into legislation, but instead of trying to implement these rights into our Constitution where they can be restricted or suspended, I will lobby for the bill to be unconnected to the Constitution. Furthermore, I will emphasize how vital it is that the rights need to be enacted as absolute rights. Absolute rights cannot be limited, suspended, or restricted for any reason, even during a declared state of emergency.
That sounds like a great solution. Can you elaborate a bit on the neuro-specific human rights you are proposing?
Sure, Jimmy. I'll briefly gloss over the fundamentals of the neuro rights that I am suggesting: the right to cognitive liberty, mental privacy, mental integrity, and psychological continuity. The right to cognitive liberty is the right of individuals to use emerging neurotechnologies as well as the protection of individuals from the coercive and unconsented use of such technologies. Cognitive liberty is a conceptual update of the freedom of thought that takes into account the power that we now have, and increasingly will have, to monitor, manipulate, and alter cognitive functions. The right to mental privacy protects any information from the brain recorded by a neuro device. It covers not only conscious brain data, but also data that is not under voluntary and conscious control. The right to mental integrity provides specific protection from neurotechnology-enabled interventions involving the unauthorized alteration of a person's neural computation. For an action to qualify as a threat to mental integrity, it has to involve the direct access to and/or manipulation of neurosignaling, and be in absence of the informed consent of the signal generator. The right to psychological continuity can be seen as a special neuro-focused instance of the right to identity. It will protect the mental substrates of personal identity from unconscious and unconsented alteration by third parties through the use of neurotechnology. In addition to mental privacy and mental integrity, people's perception of their own identity may be put at risk by inadequate uses of emerging neurotechnology. Changes in brain function may also cause unintended alterations in mental states critical to personality, and can thereby affect an individual's personal identity. There are some essential questions that come to mind when pondering this topic. Are all of the corporations that are involved in brain-computer interfaces trustworthy?
$5 billion for failing to protect the personal information of 2.3 billion users worldwide.
Is it troubling to consider the history of governments that were so focused on attaining complete control over the human brain that they were willing to experiment on, torture, and kill their own citizens? As I create this video in 2021, are we seeing a global push to abolish bodily autonomy and informed consent regarding potentially dangerous medical interventions with the justification of public protection? Is there any possible future scenario where there could be mandatory brain implants?
No offense to this website, but when I saw the headline, I had to ask myself if it was fake news because I thought, oh, come on, there's no way they actually did that. And I had to actually go myself and look up this bill. If you go and look at the language that is in this bill, it is very ambiguous. If you go look up what a developmental disability is, I mean, you're talking about things like bipolar disorder, ADD and ADHD are considered developmental disabilities, and you're going to start getting into some serious gray areas on what that means.
What kind of technological advancements have we seen in the last 30 years? More importantly, what kind of technology could exist in the next 30 years? Many neuro devices have both read and write capabilities, so what kind of behavior modification is possible? Could a person's cognitive functions be altered so they think or act differently? It's a documented fact that a person's emotional state was able to be controlled by electrical stimulation in the 60s. How far has that kind of technology advanced over the last 60 years? Considering non-invasive neuro devices operate off of brain waves by simply wearing a headset, at what point will that technology be available in other devices, like cell phones? Nothing was your own except the few cubic centimeters inside your skull. That quote from George Orwell conveys the idea that the mind is the last refuge of personal freedom. While our body can easily be subject to domination and control by others, our mind, along with our thoughts, beliefs, and convictions, are to a large extent beyond external constraint. I argue that the mind is no longer such an unassailable fortress. Humanity is facing unprecedented threats to freedom of the mind and to the individual's capacity to freely govern their own behavior. Make no mistake about it, existence as we know it is at risk. I strongly believe that it is imperative to be proactive instead of reactive on the front of neuro rights. I've been able to acquire the support of half a dozen current members of Parliament here in Canada. The general consensus is to propose a Neuro Rights Act in the form of a private member's bill. The ability to present such a bill is controlled by a lottery ranking system. Each MP that I have met with has either already presented a bill or is presumably unable to present a bill during this Parliament due to a low ranking. We need to attain the support of an MP that has a high ranking within the lottery. Unfortunately, acquiring meetings with MPs to give presentations on this topic is not an easy task. Although, if you are a constituent of a riding that is represented by an MP that I have not yet been able to give a presentation to, you do have the right to contact them and request a meeting regarding this matter. I would be happy to take part in any teleconference as a guest speaker on your behalf. For a full list of MPs that I've already spoken with, please visit globalneuroethics.com/timeline. I have also launched an official House of Commons e-petition calling for the government to enact neuro-specific human rights into legislation. House of Commons petitions are very consequential, and if it is able to attain a significant amount of public support, that will drastically increase the probability of success. Many MPs tend to keep an eye on the most popular petitions. It is open for signature until the end of October, so please take a minute to sign and/or share it on all social media platforms. The link will be provided in the description below. Enacting neuro-specific human rights into Canadian legislation will set a remarkable precedent, which will allow many other countries around the globe to follow suit with ease and adapt the same rights into their own legislation. Shoutouts to Dan Dix of Press for Truth, Aaron and Melissa Dykes of True Stream Media, James Corbett of the Corbett Report, Del Bigtree of the Highwire, James O'Keefe of Project Veritas, Ezra Levant of Rebel News, Viva Fry, Robert Barnes, JP Sears, Tim Poole, Ryan Christian, Whitney Webb, Derek Brose of The Last American Vagabond, Richard Grove, Ryan Long, Luke Radowski of We Are Change, Jason Burmis, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media, James Evan Pilato of Media Monarchy, and many more. You guys are absolute bastions of truth and liberty. If anyone is unfamiliar with any of those people, please check them out and support them if you can. Most of them are constantly battling censorship and deplatforming for speaking the truth, and they need as much help as they can get to keep doing what they do. Even if it is little as $2 or $5, it really goes a long way. If you cannot support them financially, sharing their work on all social media platforms is a great way to help as well. As for myself, I am Shad Budge on all platforms, and my website is globalneuroethics.com. If you want to support my work, I have PayPal, GoFundMe, Patreon, Subscribestar, Crypto, e-transfer. I even have a P.O. box. You name it, I got it. All the links are in the description below. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe, and remember to check in with your loved ones and make sure everyone is doing well. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.